Okay. Um, I was just sharing this on Twitter. So today we need to cover two issues because I completely forgot to uh, do anything last week, which it was just a really busy week. So um, just waiting for my second screen to catch up with me over here. Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. So in the first edition that we need to cover today, let's see. Let me remind myself what happened. I just read it, but now I can't keep track. Come on. May 16th. I think we did this one. Oh, sorry. Okay, yes, we did this one. So we're starting with the May 23rd issue. And in that issue, yeah, so he meets Clara, he meets George Talboys' father, and he sees some of George's letters that he finds, and he finds out that his uncle is sick. He confronts Lady Audley in Michael Audley's sick room, and they have this sort of unspoken standoff where he says it's the most it's a very good climactic line. He says, "I have no doubt you should have been anxious, Lady Audley," Robert said after a pause, fixing my lady's eyes as they wandered furtively to his face. "There is no one to whom my uncle's life can be of more value than to you. Your happiness, your prosperity, your safety depend on his existence." Because he's decided that while his uncle's alive, he's hoping to not have to reveal all this and make his uncle sad. And she looks at him. Lady Audley's eyes met those of the speaker with some gleam of truth in their light. "I know that," she said. "Those who strike me must strike through him." So they're having this standoff, like they're saying the same thing and like both using it as a threat. So I found interesting where they get to the section of the magazine called Gems of Wisdom and Gems of Thought. They just have these like little like 3-line blurbs of like sayings or truisms. And the first three and they all have a title. The first four are called Passions, Temptations, Collected Wisdom, and Deceit. And at least 3 of those are obviously about what you feel going on in this place or in this book. I mean, obviously, Robert is developing a passion for Clara, but also somebody like a villainous woman like Lady Audley would have been portrayed by the Victorians as like passionate. Like women were supposed to be passive and docile and not overreactive. And in fact, one reason that sensation fiction like Lady Audley's Secret was considered kind of scandalous is when they say sensation, they don't mean necessarily sensational the way we would talk about like suspense or thriller genre. They mean that like it could give you feelings and passions, and it was very scary to them that women could read this and have like passionate emotional responses because women weren't supposed to do that. So passion is somewhat of a pejorative thing to apply to women at this time, and so very much applies to Lady Audley. Temptation, she was obviously tempted by a lot of things to do the things she's done, and she is being deceitful, as Robert increasingly suspects. So, passions. Our passions never wholly die, but in the last cantos of life's romance, they rise up again and do battle, like some of Aristotle's heroes who have been quietly. Hold on, that word is hard to read. Quietly inured and ought to be turned to dust. This also applies to Michael Audley, who's a much older man and develops this like passion for Lady Audley, which is what gets us into this whole mess. And in my opinion, this whole story is somewhat a critique of that system, not just like age difference in marriage. I don't mean that, but like a system by which women can't support themselves and have to somewhat exploit themselves as a commodified object to survive. And for that reason, she marries Michael Audley, who she, probably doesn't really care for very much. So in a way, Michael Audley's passions, which set off this whole chain of events, only do so because Lucy Audley was in a position where she had to attach herself to a man. So she's at the whim of men's passions. Temptations. We gain strength from conquering strong temptations, just as the Sandwich Islander thinks that the strength and valor of the enemy he kills pass into himself. That is a weird analogy. Thanks, Victorians. Collected wisdom. We assemble conventions and councils to have the benefit of their collected wisdom, not always remembering that we must necessarily have at the same time the evils of their collected passions, prejudices, and private interests. I think that last really connects nicely to Lady Audley's secret, because although collected wisdom is not so much a part of the book, the idea that we have like generational inheritance of problems does speak to what I was saying of the systemic issue of women having to marry to support themselves. Deceit. There may be a lingering accent of love in estrangement and a clasp of kindness in the voice of anger. We often catch the cadence of anger in brisk congratulations, and the sibilance of bitterness is audible in much courtesy. That's interesting. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, this is a foreshadowing, and it uses a shipwreck or ship metaphor, like we know George Talboys came in on this ship. Deserts of thought. Men are sometimes cast away on desert islands of thought and speculation, without companionship and without worldly resources, forced to arm and clothe themselves out of the remains of shipwrecked hopes. So, building on that ship metaphor, because his hopes were wrecked when he came home, and to make a home for themselves, their solitary hearts in the nooks and corners of imagination and reading. Beauty and goodness. A lovely face is the more admired if goodness shines through it, just as the glorious sky is the oftener gazed at because heaven is there. So that all obviously speaks to like a beautiful face can hide a lot of evil. And this is another problem the Victorians had, like thinking that like women were just naturally good allows a lot of bad to get away, like allows people to get away with a lot of bad things. Okay, so we're going to go to the next issue now. And what happens in this issue is they continue the scene of Robert in Michael Audley's sick room. Robert Audley leaves. He tries to get some information out of the doctor, the family doctor. And then he gets some information from some people that Lucy Audley used to know, namely a luggage tag with a name, possibly tracing down a name change of hers from an old piece of luggage. So let's see what we have in this issue. So a long article about the capital of Egypt. So that's not particularly relevant. Then they get to their joke section, which is generally not relevant. Statistics, banking stuff, household receipts. To remove ink stains from a colored table cover, dissolve a teaspoon of oxalic acid in a teacup of water. Rub the stained part well with the solution. And that's actually really interesting because it is like literally ink remaining on an old luggage tag that is like the clue Robert Audley needs. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, okay, in this one, gems of thought, the first two are riches and money. So we obviously know, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, that a need for money because women couldn't really work in the middle and upper classes, that attaching themselves to a wealthy man was pretty much necessary. So riches should be admitted into our houses, but not into our hearts. Money, it matters little to be worth money if we are worth nothing else. To be cheerfully disposed at the, oh, that's a different article. So again, like we can think of Michael Audley and Robert being worried about breaking his heart because Michael actually wants to matter to Lucy Audley. But it's just his money that matters. There's a, ooh, truth, wisdom, and courage. The first ingredient in conversation is truth, the next, good sense, the third, good humor, and the fourth, wit. Wisdom. The wise man applauds him who he thinks most virtuous. The rest of the world, him who is most wealthy. Courage. There's a very great difference between true courage and the ignorance which detects no danger, or the stupor which is dead to it. In these, there is no more courage than in the peak which defies the lightning. That is kind of cool because Robert Audley is starting to realize that like Lucy Audley is not just going to back down. Like she's not this passive little woman. Like she is gonna fight back and like fight for her life. So that's really cool. He's having to really confront the fact that like there is actually danger here. Okay, so there's a big long poem about Poland, which is so random. And now I'm in the miscellaneous section. Stuff about a new railway. The railways continue to be really relevant in this novel. But honestly, not too much else. But I think that in some ways makes sense because actually not a lot happened in this issue. Oh, sorry, there was a really weird sound outside my house. I might go ahead and just do the next issue real quick. This is June 6th because I'm needing to catch up to my students that have read most of this novel by now. So let me just check what is happening in the next issue of Lady Audley's Secret. It's kind of weird. They moved the placement. There we go. Okay. Robert Audley is wandering around, gathering more clues. He's visiting another old acquaintance to find out more information about Lucy Audley's possible former identities. He gets more evidence about that. He continues to debate if there is any good that he's doing from stirring up his uncle's heartbreak. If he believes that George is dead, then like he says, George is dead anyway. What good is this knowledge doing? Yeah, and here he is still confronting the fact that she's fighting him. Why doesn't she run away? I would bring no needless shame on that house. I have only my duty. He wants her to just give up, and she's not. Clara Talboys shows up um, in the Audley countryside. Okay, so what is in this issue? Sunday Music in the Park is the big long article. Oh, it's short this week. They go straight from the joke section to the letters to the correspondence. They've cut out the gems of wisdom. Let me scroll back up and see, because they've actually inserted an article between the first two novels right before Lady Audley's Secret, so I can see if there's anything there. That's curious. There's the miscellaneous. They moved it. Widows' pensions. Now remember, Robert Audley thinks that Lady Audley is technically a widow, and also, well, yeah, and that but that she's hidden that. The Lords of the Treasury have sanctioned the establishment of a more liberal scale of pensions in favor of the widows of the following classes of naval officers. The widow of a commander is in future to have 80 pounds, of a lieutenant of 8 years standing, 70 pounds, and the widow of a master of 15 years standing, 30 pounds per annum. Their lordships have also authorized the Lords of Admiralty to grant 15 Greenwich out pensions of 15 pounds to old, worn out, or other disabled matters of the Royal Navy. So you can see that they're addressing the questions they think that readers would have had at this point. Namely, like, well, what were women supposed to do? Like, we like to think of the Victorians as very backwards, and in some ways they were, right? Because, like, this is what women had to do to survive, but they are thinking about the issue. Like, what recourse would there be to penniless women? And here they mention at least one. There's a little thing called Satan's handwriting, which I think is somewhat relevant because in this section, Robert Audley is comparing handwriting of two letters to confirm what he thinks is like a new or fake identity of Lucy Audley. In the cathedral, Satan's handwriting. In the Cathedral of modern Girgenti in Italy, there's a picture of the Madonna and Sleeping Child. Quite exquisite, a perfect gem by Guido. In the archives of the cathedral, we were shown Satan's handwriting, never yet deciphered. One intelligible word only throughout, but it has always been said to be the devil's writing, addressed to a virgin saint as a temptation, is preserved in the manuscript life of the Saint Sosa Maria, and with it was copied to be sent to Rome by her family, the Palmi, in order to her regular canonization. A grave person in showing it said he could not quite vouch that it was the devil's writing. Okay, yeah, that's pretty much it in these two issues. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to forget next week. That way I won't have to do 2 or 3 at once. But I'm going to end this now so that it's not too long for my students who are also doing many other things as they prep up for finals right now. So Okay, bye, guys.